She felt like her manager's hand was yanking her hair out by the roots in front of all 50 diners. Completely humiliated and utterly helpless. Then, a Mafia boss at table 7 stood up, his voice soft but leaving no room for argument. What Isabella didn't know was that the man who was about to defend her had sworn off violence for good, and saving her would drag him kicking and screaming back into the very darkness he'd been running from his whole life. The wine glass shattered before Isabella Connie even knew what she was doing. Red liquid bloomed across the pristine white tablecloth like blood at a crime scene, soaking into the ridiculously expensive fabric and dripping onto the guest's lap. The woman, practically drowning in diamonds and burning with fury, shrieked loud enough to stop everyone in the entire restaurant dead in their tracks. "You clumsy idiot!" Isabella's hands shook like crazy as she grabbed a handful of napkins, her apologies tripping over each other in a desperate rush. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Please let me get you some." The woman stood up, her designer dress now sporting a bright crimson stain. "This is a $3,000 Valentino." The dining room of Casa Verona had gone stone-cold silent. 50 pairs of eyes watched the whole scene play out. The soft jazz music drifting from the corner suddenly felt totally out of place, almost like it was mocking her. Isabella's face burned with shame as she tried to salvage the situation, but her hands just wouldn't stop trembling. Then she heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, angry. Marco Ricci, the restaurant manager, stomped across the dining room floor like a raging bull seeing red. His face was twisted with fury, veins popping out on his temples. Isabella had seen that look before, usually right before someone got fired on the spot. "You stupid." He didn't even finish the sentence. Instead, his hand shot out and grabbed a fistful of Isabella's dark hair, yanking her head back so hard and fast that she gasped in shock and pain. The napkins slipped from her trembling hands. "How many times do I have to tell you?" Richie snarled, his face practically pressed against hers, his breath hot and sour. "You're worthless. Absolutely worthless. This is the third screw-up this week." Tears stung Isabella's eyes, but she flat out refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of everyone. She could feel every single eye in the restaurant burning into her. Could sense the collective discomfort of the diners who suddenly found their plates super interesting. "Let go of me!" She somehow managed to choke out, her scalp screaming in protest. "You're fired," Richie shouted, shaking her head back and forth like a rag doll. "Do you hear me? Fired. Get your things and get out." The voice sliced through the chaos like a hot knife through butter, quiet, but somehow louder than Richie's shouting. It had an air of authority about it that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Everyone turned to look. At table 7, near the window overlooking the breathtaking Chicago skyline, a man slowly stood up. He was younger than Isabella expected, maybe 35, with dark hair slicked back, a flawlessly tailored charcoal suit, and eyes that could freeze fire solid. He wasn't the loudest person in the room or the biggest, but the second he stood up, he became the center of attention. Everything seemed to be pulled toward him. He carefully removed his watch, a Patek Philippe that probably cost more than Isabella made in an entire year, and set it gently on the table. The gesture seemed casual, almost lazy, but something about it made Isabella's blood run cold. This wasn't a man just trying to make a scene. This was a man gearing up for war. "I said," he repeated, his tone still conversational, still soft. "Let her go before you regret the next 10 seconds of your life." Richie's grip loosened a little, but he still didn't let Isabella go. His face was flushed red with a nasty mix of anger and embarrassment. "This is none of your business, sir. This is a staff matter. It became my business the moment you put your hands on her." The man took a step forward. Just one. But the entire atmosphere in the restaurant changed. 2 other men, huge, silent, wearing suits that didn't quite hide how built they were, stood up from a table nearby. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. Isabella felt Richie's hand trembling in her hair. "Do you even know who I am?" Richie tried, his voice cracking just a little. "I've been managing this restaurant for 8 years. I have every right to discipline my staff as I..." "You have 3 seconds." The man's voice dropped even lower, almost gentle now, which somehow made it even more terrifying. 3, 2. Richie released Isabella so fast that she stumbled forward. He stepped back, hands raised, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. Fine. But she's still fired. No. The man walked forward now, each step measured and filled with purpose. He stopped next to Isabella, not looking at her, but keeping his eyes locked on Richie. She's not fired. You are. Richie laughed. A nervous, desperate sound. I don't think you understand how this works, sir. I'm the manager here. You can't just... I can. The man pulled out his phone, made a single call and said 4 words. By Casa Verona. Tonight. Then he hung up. The whole exchange took less than 10 seconds. The restaurant held its breath as one. Richie's face went from red to white in an instant. You can't. That's not. By tomorrow morning, I'll own this building and everything in it. The man finally turned to look at Isabella, his expression softening just a tiny bit. Are you hurt? Isabella touched her scalp, which was still throbbing. She wanted to say something strong, something brave, but all that came out was, I'm fine. No, you're not. He turned back to Richie. You have 60 seconds to leave before my patience runs out. I suggest you don't waste them. Richie looked around desperately, hoping for support, for someone to stand up to this stranger's insane authority. But the other diners pointedly looked away. The kitchen staff had gathered in the doorway, watching in total silence. Even the hostess seemed to shrink into the corner. The 2 bodyguards took a step closer. Richie bolted. He actually ran through the restaurant, knocking over a chair in his frantic rush to reach the exit. The door slammed shut behind him, and the silence that followed was absolutely deafening. The man straightened his cuffs, picked up his watch, and fastened it back onto his wrist. Then, he turned to the entire restaurant and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, everyone's meal tonight is on me, including wine, dessert, whatever you want. And I apologize that your evening was interrupted by a man who forgot how to treat people with dignity. He pulled out a black credit card and handed it to the stunned hostess. Then, without another word, he walked toward the exit. Isabella stood frozen, her mind reeling. Who the hell was this guy? Why had he done that? And why did everyone in the restaurant look absolutely terrified of him? She made a split-second decision before she could talk herself out of it. Wait! She ran after him, ignoring the whispers that erupted behind her, ignoring the throbbing pain in her scalp, ignoring every voice in her head that was screaming, this is a terrible idea. She caught up to him just outside the restaurant in the alley that smelled of garlic and rain. You didn't save me, she said, her voice sounding sharper than she meant it to. Her emotions were all over the place. Gratitude, anger, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite put her finger on. You just wanted to prove who's boss. He stopped, turned, and looked at her with those impossibly dark eyes. For a split second, she thought she saw surprise flicker across his face. Then something else, amusement maybe, or even respect. Maybe, he said, a half-smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Or maybe I just don't like watching men hurt women who work harder than them. They stood there in the Chicago night, 2 strangers connected by an act of violence and now by something that neither of them could name. And Isabella knew with absolute certainty that her life had just taken a hard left turn. The alley was cold, but Isabella's blood was running hot. So that's your thing? She said, crossing her arms. You swoop in, throw money around, and expect everyone to fall at your feet in gratitude? The man tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected to find. His bodyguard stood a respectful distance away near a black SUV with tinted windows, watching but not getting involved. Most people would say thank you, he observed, his tone mild. Unlike most people. Isabella took a step closer, her fear evaporating in the face of her anger. The adrenaline from the confrontation was still pumping through her veins. And she was done being afraid, done being pushed around. You humiliated Richie in there, made a big show, bought an entire restaurant just to prove a point. That's not kindness. That's ego. You're right. Isabella blinked. She'd been braced for defensiveness, maybe even arrogance, but not agreement. It was ego, he continued, leaning back against the brick wall. He looked more relaxed now, less like the dangerous man from inside and more like someone who might actually be human. About 60% ego. The other 40%. You really do hate bullies? Isabella finished for him. Despite herself, Isabella felt her anger waver. 60%. Maybe 65. That half-smile again. I'm being honest. I could have handled it quietly. Paid for your legal fees, gotten Richie fired through the proper channels. But where's the fun in that? Fun. Isabella's voice rose. That was my job in there. My livelihood. Did it occur to you that maybe I needed that job? That maybe getting fired in such a spectacular fashion, even if you supposedly prevented it, might make it impossible for me to get work anywhere else in the city? The smile faded from his face. I didn't think of that. Of course you didn't. Isabella paced the narrow alley, her worn-out work shoes splashing through a puddle. Rich people never do. You see a problem, you throw money at it, and you assume that fixes everything. But I have rent due in 6 days. I have student loans. I have a life that doesn't include mysterious strangers buying restaurants on a whim. He pushed off from the wall, and suddenly he was closer than she'd realized. Not threatening, just present in a way that made the air feel thicker. What's your name? He asked. Why should I tell you? Because I'd like to know what to call the only person in Chicago brave enough to yell at me in an alley. Isabella hesitated. Something about the way he said it, without any mockery, without any condescension, made her defenses crack just a little. Isabella. Adrian Moretti. He extended his hand. She stared at it. A handshake seemed absurdly formal after everything that had just happened, but she took it anyway. His grip was firm, warm, and lasted a fraction of a second longer than it needed to. Look, Isabella, Adrian said, releasing her hand. You're right. I didn't think about the consequences for you. I saw a woman being assaulted by her boss, and I reacted. Maybe too strongly, maybe selfishly, but I'm not apologizing for getting him away from you. I didn't ask you to apologize for that part. Isabella's voice was quieter now. Just next time you want to play hero, maybe consider that the person you're saving might not want to be saved that way. There won't be a next time. Why? Because you've learned your lesson? She couldn't keep the sarcasm out of her voice. No. Adrienne's expression turned serious. Because I meant what I said in there. By tomorrow morning, I'll own Casa Verona, and you'll have your job back if you want it. Better hours, better pay, and definitely a better manager. Isabella laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound. You're actually serious? You're gonna buy an entire restaurant because you got into an argument with the manager? I've made worse investments for worse reasons. That's insane. Probably, he shrugged. And for a moment, he looked younger, less like the commanding presence from the dining room, and more like someone who was making things up as he went along. But I'm committed now. The call's been made. My people are already drawing up the papers. Your people? Isabella shook her head. Who are you? Some kind of real estate mogul? Tech billionaire? Something flickered across Adrienne's face. Something dark and complicated. Something like that. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving tonight. He glanced at his watch. It's late. Can I give you a ride home? Absolutely not. The words came out automatically. I don't know you. You could be a serial killer for all I know. Fair point. Adrian pulled out a business card. Thick, expensive cardstock with minimal text. Just a name and a phone number. Call me tomorrow. We'll talk about your future at Casa Verona, or don't. Your choice. Isabella took the card, studying it in the dim light of the alley. The name meant nothing to her, but something about the weight of it in her hand felt significant. Why do you care? She asked. Really, why does any of this matter to you? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, stripped of its usual confidence and control. My mother was a waitress, he said, in Florence before we moved to the States. She worked 16-hour shifts at a restaurant where the owner treated her like dirt. grabbed her, yelled at her just like Richie did to you. One night he hit her. She quit, but the damage was done. She never quite trusted restaurants again. Never quite trusted men in power again. Isabella felt her throat tighten. I am sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't let men like Richie make you feel small. He turned toward the SUV, then paused. And Isabella, you were right to call me out. Most people are too afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. I need that around me. I wasn't trying to do you a favor. I know. That's what made it valuable. He walked to the SUV, his bodyguards opening the door in perfect synchronization. Before he got in, he looked back one more time. The offer stands. Tomorrow. Think about it. Then he was gone. The SUV disappearing into Chicago's late-night traffic, leaving Isabella standing in an alley, holding a business card and wondering what the hell had just happened to her life. She looked down at the card again. Adrian Moretti. Why did that name sound so familiar? Isabella didn't sleep that night. She lay in her cramped studio apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, turning Adrian's business card over and over in her hands. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the scene replaying. Richie's hand in her hair, the wine spreading across the tablecloth, and those dark eyes watching from table 7. By 6 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and made coffee. By 7, she was back at Casa Verona. The restaurant looked different in daylight, smaller, somehow less magical. The windows she'd cleaned 1,000 times reflected the morning sun. The door she'd walked through for 3 years stood closed, a handwritten sign taped to the glass. Closed for renovations. Renovations already? He actually did it. Isabella whispered to herself. You didn't hear? She jumped. Carlos, one of the line cooks, was leaning against the building with a cigarette. He looked exhausted. His chef's whites rumpled like he'd slept in them. Girl, where have you been? Carlos took a long drag. That's all anyone's been talking about. That guy from last night, he bought the whole place, paid cash. The owners didn't even try to negotiate. They just took the money and ran. Isabella's stomach flipped. He really did it. That's not even the crazy part. Carlos lowered his voice, glancing around like the empty street might be listening. You know who he is, right? Adrian Moretti. He gave me his card. The name doesn't ring any bells. When Isabella shook her head, Carlos's eyes widened. Jesus, Isabella. Adrian Moretti? As in the Moretti family? As in Chicago's most dangerous? He stopped himself, took another drag. You really don't know? A chill ran down Isabella's spine. Know what? Before Carlos could answer, Maria appeared in the doorway. The head hostess had been at Casa Verona longer than anyone. 15 years of seating guests and managing reservations. She looked pale, shaken. Isabella, thank God. Maria grabbed her arm. Come inside. We need to talk. All of us. Inside. The entire staff had gathered inside. Waiters, cooks, dishwashers, even old Tony, who usually never left the kitchen. They were clustered around the bar, voices hushed, phones out. The atmosphere felt heavy, almost funeral-like. What's going on? Isabella asked. We've been doing some research on our new boss, said James, a waiter who'd been there almost as long as Maria. He turned his phone around, showing Isabella a news article. And we found some interesting information. The headline made Isabella's blood run cold. Moretti family patriarch dies in prison. End of a criminal empire. She grabbed the phone, scrolling through the article. The words jumped out at her in fragments. Organized crime, racketeering, violence, money laundering, Chicago's underworld, 30-year sentence. And there, in a grainy photo from 15 years ago, was a younger Adrian Moretti standing beside an older gray-haired man at some kind of formal dinner. His father was Vincent Moretti, Maria said quietly, one of the most powerful mob bosses in Chicago history. They controlled everything. Gambling, construction, unions. The FBI spent 20 years trying to bring them down. But they did, James added. Big trial about 8 years ago. Vincent Moretti got life in prison. Died there 2 years ago. Heart attack. Isabella's hands trembled as she scrolled through more articles. There were photos of Adrian, younger, angrier, being led away by federal agents. Headlines screaming about trials and testimonies and plea deals. Adrian testified against his own father, Carlos said. That's how the feds finally got him. He turned state's witness, gave them everything. Bank accounts, shell companies, the whole operation. He was never charged with anything himself. Maria pointed out, the articles say he was kept out of the family business. Vincent wanted him to go legitimate, get an MBA, clean up the family image. Adrian cooperated with the investigation in exchange for immunity. Still, James said darkly, you don't just walk away from a family like that. Once you're a Moretti, you're always a Moretti. Isabella felt dizzy. The man who had defended her last night, who had talked about his mother with such tenderness, who'd smiled that half-smile in the alley. He was the son of a mob boss. His father had died in prison for crimes that probably included murder. There's more, Carlos said. After the trial, Adrian disappeared completely off the grid for like 5 years. No one knew where he went. Then, about 2 years ago, he resurfaced. Started investing in businesses around Chicago. Restaurants, mostly real estate. All legitimate, supposedly. But what? Isabella's voice came out hoarse. But the word on the street is that he's not just investing. Maria glanced toward the door as if checking for eavesdroppers. People say he's rebuilding. Not the criminal empire, something different. Power through money instead of violence. Some people call him the legitimate prince. Others say he's even more dangerous than his father because you can't see him coming. And he bought this restaurant, Isabella said slowly, because I yelled at my manager. No, James shook his head. That's what we've been trying to figure out. Adrian Moretti doesn't do anything randomly. If he bought Casa Verona, it's because it fits into something bigger. Maybe he's laundering money. Maybe he's using it as a front. Or maybe he just wanted to help someone, Isabella interrupted, surprising herself. She thought about the way Adrian had looked when he talked about his mother. The anger in his eyes when Richie grabbed her hair. Maybe not everything is a conspiracy. The staff exchanged glances that clearly said they thought Isabella was being naive. Look, Maria said gently, we're all grateful you don't have to deal with Richie anymore. And the new contract terms Adrian's lawyers sent over this morning are incredible. Better pay, health insurance, profit sharing. It's more than we ever dreamed of. But Isabella, you need to be careful. A man like Adrian Moretti doesn't do favors without expecting something in return. Isabella's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Coffee? We should talk about Casa Verona's future. She stared at the message, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to run, to forget last night ever happened, to find another restaurant and pretend Adrian Moretti didn't exist. But another part, the part that had confronted him in the alley, the part that was tired of being afraid, wanted answers. She typed back, where? The response came immediately. I'll send a car. Don't worry. I promise you'll make it home alive. Despite everything, Isabella smiled. At least he had a sense of humor about being dangerous. I'm meeting him, she announced. The staff erupted in protests, but Isabella held up her hand. He bought this place. He's our boss now. I need to know what he wants. She paused. And honestly, I need to know if you're all right. If the man who saved me last night is the monster everyone says he is. What if he is? Carlos asked quietly. Isabella picked up her jacket. Then at least I'll know the truth. The car that arrived for Isabella was not what she expected. She'd imagined something ostentatious. A stretch limousine, maybe, or another black SUV with tinted windows. Instead, a simple silver Tesla pulled up, driven by a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. Isabella Connie? The woman asked through the open window. That's me. I'm Margaret. I work for Mr. Moretti. Hop in, sweetheart. He's waiting at the cafe on Monroe Street. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner. Through the window, Isabella could see Adrian sitting at a corner table typing on a laptop. He was wearing jeans and a simple black sweater. No suit, no bodyguards visible. He looked almost normal. Almost. Thank you for coming, he said when she approached. standing to pull out her chair. The gesture was old-fashioned, oddly courteous from a man whose father had ruled Chicago's underworld. Did I have a choice? Isabella sat, keeping her purse in her lap, her escape route mentally mapped. Yes. Adrian closed his laptop. You always have a choice, Isabella. That's important to me. I never want you to feel trapped. A barista brought over 2 espressos without Adrian ordering. He must be a regular here, Isabella realized. The thought was strange. Imagining Adrian Moretti with regular habits, favorite coffee shops, and a normal life. I know you've heard the stories by now, Adrian said, stirring sugar into his cup. About my family, about me. Are they true? Which parts? All of them. Isabella met his gaze. Was your father Vincent Moretti? Did he run organized crime in Chicago? Did you testify against him? Yes, and yes. Adrian didn't flinch. Anything else you want to know? His honesty surprised her. Why did you turn on your own father? Adrian was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost sad. Because I watched him destroy everything he touched. My mother died when I was 19. Cancer that could have been treated if we'd caught it earlier. But she was too afraid to go to doctors. Too afraid they'd ask questions about bruises, about stress, about why a woman married to a wealthy man looked so haunted. He looked up. My father didn't hit her. He didn't have to. The fear did all the work. Isabella felt her throat tighten. After she died, I was supposed to take my place in. Vincent had kept me in the clear, funded my business education, and shielded me from any involvement in illegal activities. All to position me as the respectable face of the Moretti family's enterprise. Adrienne's tone dripped with bitterness as she uttered those words. But I witnessed the very foundations upon which that empire stood. Shattered families, businesses driven to ruin, and individuals too paralyzed by fear to resist. I couldn't bring myself to be a part of it. So you turned to the FBI? I handed them everything. Bank records, names, every detail of their operations. And yes, that included my father. She locked eyes with him, her gaze unwavering. Do you see me as a hero or a traitor for what I did? I think it makes you human, Isabella replied softly, her voice filled with understanding. A flicker of vulnerability softened Adrienne's features. Most people don't see it that way. In my father's world, family loyalty trumps everything. What I did was considered unforgivable. There are still individuals in Chicago who would kill me for it if they believed they could get away with it. Then why come back? Why not just disappear permanently? Because running away didn't work, Adrian confessed, leaning forward with renewed intensity. I spent 5 years in Florence, desperately trying to reinvent myself. I learned to cook in my grandmother's kitchen, worked in restaurants, and attempted to build a life completely separate from Vincent Moretti's influence. But no matter where I went, I was still perceived as his son, forever burdened by that legacy. So, I decided that if I couldn't escape it, I would find a way to use it. Use it how? By constructing something entirely different, something legitimate. Real businesses, real jobs, real value. His eyes shone with newfound purpose. My father used fear to manipulate and control people. I want to use opportunity to empower them. That's why I invest in restaurants and small businesses. That's why I bought Casa Verona. Because you want to prove that you're not your father? Isabella stated, recognizing his underlying motivation. No. Adrian shook his head, his determination unwavering. Because I want to prove that I'm better than him. And that's where you come in. Isabella's body tensed up. She felt the hairs on her neck stand up on end. What do you mean? Adrian slid a folder across the table. Its weight significant. I'm offering you a position as an operations consultant for Casa Verona. You would work directly with me to rebuild the restaurant from the ground up. A new menu, a new management structure, a new culture, better than it ever was, better than anything else in Chicago. Isabella opened the folder, and her jaw nearly dropped. The salary listed was 3 times what she had been earning. In addition to health insurance, profit sharing, and a signing bonus that would cover 6 months of rent. "This is insane," she whispered, unable to fully comprehend the offer. "It's fair compensation for someone with your skills and insight." "My skills?" Isabella scoffed. "I'm a waitress. I spill wine on customers and get yelled at by managers. What skills could I possibly have?" "You know that restaurant inside and out," Adrian interrupted, his voice firm and unwavering. "You know what works and what doesn't. You know what the staff needs, what the customers want, and, more importantly, you had the courage to tell me I was wrong. Do you know how rare that is? Most people are too afraid of me to be honest. I need someone who isn't." Isabella stared at the contract, her mind racing. It offered everything she had ever dreamed of: financial security, respect, a chance to actually build something instead of just serving it. But the price was steep. She would have to put her reputation on the line to prove Adrienne's name can mean something good. Adrienne's voice was intense now, almost pleading. "I want someone who will call me out when I'm being an arrogant ass. I want a partner who sees possibilities, not just problems. And yes, I want someone who reminds me why I'm doing this in the first place. I'm not your redemption story. I'm not asking you to be." He leaned back, his gaze softening. "I'm asking you to be excellent at your job, to push back when I'm wrong, to help build something worth being proud of. Everything else, the philosophy, the meaning, that's my problem, not yours." Isabella looked at the contract again. At the bottom, there was a handwritten note. "You treat me as an equal, or this doesn't work." "I see." She looked up sharply. "Did you write this?" "I figured you'd want that in writing." Adrian smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Well, do we have a deal?" Every logical part of Isabella's brain screamed at her to walk away. Adrian Moretti was dangerous, complicated, dragging a legacy of violence behind him like chains. Getting involved with him, even professionally, was asking for trouble. But she thought about Ricci's hand in her hair, about 3 years of scraping by on tips and dealing with abuse, about the way Adrian had stood up for her when no one else would. And she thought about the passion in his voice when he talked about building something better. "I have one condition," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Name it. You treat me as an equal, not as a project, not as a statement, not as proof of your redemption. If this is going to work, it's because we're partners. Real partners." Adrian extended his hand across the table, his gaze unwavering. "That's exactly why I chose you." Isabella took his hand, sealing a deal that would change everything. "When do I start?" "Right now." Adrian grinned, a real smile this time, not the careful half-smile from before. "We have a restaurant to rebuild. And trust me, Isabella Key, you're going to love what we're about to create." She believed him. God help her, she actually believed him. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of sawdust, paint samples, and arguments. "Absolutely not," Isabella said, holding up the menu proposal. "Truffle oil on everything? This isn't 2015, Adrian. People want honest food, not pretentious garbage." Adrian looked up from the floor plans spread across what used to be Casa Verona's dining room. Construction workers moved around them, tearing out old booths and refinishing the hardwood floors. "It's a classic flavor profile," he protested. "It's lazy." Isabella circled 3 items with a red pen. "If you want to honor your Italian heritage, let's do it right. Real ingredients, simple preparations. Your grandmother didn't use truffle oil, did she?" A smile tugged at Adrienne's mouth. "She'd have thrown it at my head." "Smart woman." Isabella tossed the menu back to him. "Try again." It became their rhythm. Adrian would propose something usually too expensive, too complicated, or too influenced by whatever food trend he'd read about. Isabella would shoot it down, and they'd argue until they found something better. The staff watched these exchanges with barely concealed amusement. "They fight like an old married couple," Carlos whispered to Maria as Adrian and Isabella debated tile choices for the 3rd time that day. "Except married couples eventually agree on something," Maria whispered back. But they were wrong. Beneath the arguments, Adrian and Isabella were building something remarkable. The new Casa Verona, they decided to keep the name, was taking shape as a blend of old-world elegance and modern comfort. Adrienne's eye for design and Isabella's practical knowledge of how a restaurant actually worked created something neither could have achieved alone. The late nights started in the second week. "Go home," Adrienne said one evening, finding Isabella still at the restaurant at 11 p.m. reviewing supplier contracts. "I will, just finishing these." "Isabella, you've been here since 7 this morning." "So have you." He couldn't argue with that. Instead, he went to the kitchen, the only part of the restaurant still functional, and came back 15 minutes later with 2 plates of pasta. "You cooked." Isabella stared at the cacio e pepe like it might be poisoned. "My grandmother's recipe. I told you I spent time in her kitchen." Adrian sat across from her, twirling pasta on his fork. "Eat. You can't rebuild a restaurant on coffee and stubbornness alone." Isabella took a bite and nearly moaned. The pasta was perfect, silky, rich with just the right amount of black pepper bite. "This is incredible. My grandmother believed good food was medicine for the body and the soul." Adrian watched her eat with an expression she couldn't quite read. "She used to say that cooking for someone was the most honest thing you could do. You can't fake it. Either you care enough to do it right or you don't." "Did you cook for your father?" The question slipped out before Isabella could stop it. They had avoided talking about Vincent Moretti since that first conversation at the cafe. "Once," Adrian said quietly. "When I came back from business school, I made him dinner. Everything my grandmother taught me. I thought maybe if I showed him I could create something beautiful, something that didn't hurt people, he'd understand why I couldn't join the family business." "What did he say?" "He said cooking was for women and servants, that I was wasting my education." Adrian set down his fork. 3 months later, I went to the FBI. Isabella reached across the table, her hand covering his. She didn't plan it, didn't think about it. The gesture just felt right. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. It led me here." His hand turned under hers, their fingers intertwining. "To this restaurant. To this moment." The air between them changed, charged. Isabella became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how his thumb was tracing small circles on her palm, how his dark eyes seemed to see straight through her. She pulled her hand back. "We should finish eating, right?" Adrian cleared his throat. Of course. Something had shifted. The next night, Isabella burned her hand on a hot pan while testing recipes in the kitchen. Damn it. She dropped the pan, tears springing to her eyes. Adrian was beside her in seconds. "Let me see. It's fine. Isabella." His voice was firm but gentle. "Let me see." She held out her hand. The burn wasn't terrible, red and angry, but not blistering. Adrian led her to the sink, running cool water over it with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "You need to be more careful," he murmured, examining the burn. "I know how to handle a kitchen. I know, but I prefer if you kept all your fingers." He found the first aid kit, pulling out burn cream and gauze. "Hold still." His fingers were gentle as he bandaged her hand, his head bent in concentration. Isabella watched him work, noticing details she tried to ignore before. The way his hair fell forward, the strong line of his jaw, the faint scar above his left eyebrow. "Where'd you get that scar?" she asked. Adrian touched his eyebrow reflexively. "Bar fight. I was 22, drunk and stupid. Told some guy he was wrong about the best pizza in Chicago." Isabella laughed. "You got into a fight over pizza?" "It was Giordano's versus Lou Malnati's. These things matter." He finished tying off the bandage. "They're good as new." But he didn't let go of her hand. They stood there, the kitchen quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Neither moving, neither breathing. "Adrian," Isabella whispered. "I know." His voice was rough. "This is complicated. You're my boss. Technically, we're partners. You're Vincent Moretti's son. I can't change that." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "But I can choose who I am now, who I want to be." "And who's that?" "Someone worthy of the way you look at me." He stepped closer. "Someone who doesn't screw this up." Isabella's heart hammered. Screw what up? This, US, whatever this is becoming. She should step back. Should put professional distance between them. Should remember that Adrian Moretti was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his family name and everything to do with the way he made her feel. Instead, she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Thank you for the bandage. She left him standing in the kitchen, but she could feel his eyes on her all the way to the door. That night, alone in her apartment, Isabella touched her bandaged hand and smiled. This was definitely complicated, but maybe, just maybe, complicated was exactly what she needed. We need to go to Siena, Adrian announced 3 days later, walking into the restaurant with 2 plane tickets. Isabella looked up from the wine list she was curating. Excuse me? There's a culinary festival 3 days, the best artisan producers in Tuscany. Olive oil, cheese, wine, pasta makers. If we're going to make Casa Verona authentic, we need authentic partnerships. He slid a ticket across the table. We leave tomorrow. Tomorrow. Isabella's voice rose. Adrian, I can't just drop everything and fly to Italy. We have the grand opening in 3 weeks. The staff training starts Monday. The liquor license still hasn't. Margaret's handling the license. Carlos can run the training. He knows the menu as well as we do. And the opening will be better if we have real Italian ingredients, not the commercial stuff we can get in Chicago. Adrian leaned against the table. Besides, when's the last time you took a vacation? I don't take vacations. I work. Exactly my point. He pushed the ticket closer. 3 days, Isabella. Think of it as research. Business expenses, separate hotel rooms, completely professional. The way he said completely professional made her think he was trying to convince himself as much as her. This is insane, she said, even as she picked up the ticket. That seems to be my specialty. Siena in September was golden. Isabella had never been to Italy, never been anywhere really. Her parents had immigrated from Italy to Chicago before she was born, but they'd never had the money to visit. Standing in the Piazza del Campo, surrounded by medieval buildings and the smell of espresso, she felt something unlock in her chest. It's beautiful, she breathed. Adrian stood beside her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. My grandmother brought me here when I was 10. She said Siena was where Tuscany kept its heart. He pointed toward the Duomo. Come on, the festival starts in an hour, but I want to show you something first. They walked through narrow streets that wound like secrets, past shops selling hand-painted ceramics and leather goods. Adrian moved through the city like he belonged there, greeting shopkeepers in fluid Italian, navigating the maze of alleys without hesitation. He stopped at a small trattoria tucked into a corner. This is where my grandmother worked before she moved to America. The owner's grandson runs it now. An elderly man emerged, his face lighting up when he saw Adrian. They embraced, rapid Italian flowing between them. Then the old man turned to Isabella, taking her hands. Bella, Bella, he said, winking at Adrian. Finata. Isabella looked at Adrian. What did he say? He said, You're smart. Adrian's ears were slightly red. He's making assumptions. What kind of assumptions? The kind Italian grandmothers and their friends always make. Adrian cleared his throat. Come on. The festival. The festival was overwhelming in the best way. Endless stalls of olive oil for tasting, wheels of Parmigiano Reggiano being cracked open, wine flowing freely. Isabella took notes furiously while Adrian negotiated with producers, his Italian smooth and confident. You're different here, she observed as they walked between stalls. The afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. Different how? Lighter, like you're not carrying as much weight. In Chicago, you're always aware of who's watching, who's judging. Here, you're just you. Adrian was quiet for a moment. That's because Chicago knows Vincent Moretti. Siena only knows Adrian. He stopped walking, turning to face her. That's why I came back here after the trial, to remember who I was before I became my father's son. And did you remember? I started to. His eyes held hers. And I'm remembering more now. Isabella's breath caught. They were standing in the middle of a crowded festival, surrounded by noise and laughter, but it felt like they were completely alone. "Adrian, try this," a vendor interrupted, thrusting glasses of wine at them. "Brunello di Montalcino, the best in Tuscany." The moment broke. Isabella laughed, taking the glass. To research, Adrian agreed, but his eyes said something different. They had dinner at a small restaurant outside the city walls, overlooking the Tuscan countryside. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and amber. "What are you really running from?" Isabella asked, emboldened by wine and the distance from Chicago. Adrian swirled his wine, considering that's not quite the right question. "Then what is? What am I running toward?" He set down his glass. "For years, I thought I was running from my father's legacy, from the violence, the fear, the darkness. But that's not it. I'm running towards something my father never could. Peace. A life built on creation instead of destruction." "That's a beautiful goal," Isabella said softly. "It's also exhausting." Adrian's voice was raw. "Every day in Chicago, I feel people watching, waiting for me to become him, to slip back into that world. Some days I'm so tired of fighting against expectations that I wonder if it wouldn't be easier to just give in." "But you don't." "No, because that would mean he won." Adrian looked at her, and in the fading light he looked younger, vulnerable. "And because now I have something worth fighting for. The restaurant. More than that." He reached across the table, his fingers finding hers. "A reason to be better than I was yesterday." Isabella's heart raced. "Adrian, we work together. This could complicate things." "I know." He didn't let go of her hand. "I've been telling myself that for 2 weeks. Stay professional, keep distance, don't make things messy. But Isabella, I'm tired of running from things that scare me. And you terrify me." "Why?" "Because you make me want things I didn't think I deserved. A real partnership, trust, something that isn't built on fear or power or legacy." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "You make me want to be someone worth knowing." "You already are," Isabella whispered. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Then Adrian stood, coming around to her side of the table. He offered his hand. "Walk with me." They walked through the Tuscan evening, through olive groves and past stone farmhouses, not talking, just existing together. When they reached a small overlook, Adrian stopped. "I don't want to screw this up," he said quietly. "Then don't." Isabella turned to face him. "Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't treat me like I'm fragile. Don't." He kissed her, soft, tentative, asking permission with every second. Isabella's hands found his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing as fast as hers. The Tuscan sunset painted them gold, 2 people trying to become something better than their pasts. When they pulled apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "Still complicated," he murmured. "Absolutely," Isabella breathed. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe it is." They stood there as the sun set completely, holding each other, neither one running anymore. The flight back to Chicago felt too short. Isabella and Adrian spent it planning the menu, reviewing contracts, maintaining the careful, professional distance they'd agreed upon. But every accidental touch, hands brushing over papers, shoulders bumping in the cramped airline seats, reminded them of Siena, of sunset and promises, and a kiss that had changed everything. "We should talk about it," Isabella said as they waited for their luggage. "About what?" Adrian's tone was carefully neutral, but his hand found the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. "About what happens now in Chicago. Now we open the best restaurant the city has ever seen." He grabbed their bags. "Everything else we figure out as we go." It should have felt uncertain. Instead, it felt like possibility. Casa Verona was beautiful. The renovations had finished while they were gone. Margaret had overseen everything. The new bar with its marble top, the open kitchen design, the warm lighting that made everything glow. The staff had completed training. The opening was set for Friday night, just 4 days away. "It's perfect," Isabella breathed, walking through the transformed space. It's not just mine anymore, Adrian said, standing beside her. It's ours. The word hung between them. Ours. A restaurant, a partnership, maybe something more. Isabella's phone buzzed, then Adrienne's, then both again. That's weird, Isabella muttered, checking the screen. It was a news alert. Fire at Moretti-owned property in River North. Adrienne's face went pale. That's the wine bar I bought last year. More alerts. Another fire, this time at a cafe in Lincoln Park. Then a text message to Adrienne's phone from an unknown number. He showed it to Isabella, his jaw tight. Florence remembers its king. Step aside, or burn. Florence. Isabella's stomach dropped. But your father's organization was dismantled. The FBI took out the leadership. But foot soldiers don't just disappear. They regroup, they wait. And apparently they're tired of waiting. Within an hour, they learned the extent of it. 3 properties damaged, 1 employee injured, not seriously, but enough to send a message. And more texts, all saying the same thing. Adrian had betrayed his father, and now Chicago's underworld wanted him gone. We need to close the restaurant, Isabella said. At least until... No. Adrienne's voice was steel. That's exactly what they want. They want me to run, to hide, to prove I'm weak. Adrian, this isn't about ego. People could get hurt. People are already hurt. He slammed his hand on the bar. Don't you see? If I back down now, it never stops. They'll keep burning, keep threatening, keep taking until there's nothing left. Isabella grabbed his arm. Then what do we do? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he looked at her, the mask had dropped completely. This wasn't a smooth investor or the reformed son. This was something harder. Something forged in a world Isabella had only read about. I handle it, he said. My way. The next day, Adrian disappeared. Isabella tried calling, texting, even going to his penthouse apartment. Nothing. Margaret would only say, he's taking care of business. Give him time. But the restaurant still needed to open. Isabella threw herself into preparations, working 18-hour days, trying not to think about where Adrian was or what taking care of business meant. On the 3rd day, Marco arrived. Isabella knew him from photos. Adrian's oldest friend, the one who'd stood by him during the trial. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his left cheek and eyes that had seen too much. You're Isabella, he said. It wasn't a question. Where's Adrian? Working. He asked me to check on you, make sure you're safe. Safe from what? Marco's expression was grim. From the consequences of being connected to him. He showed her a file. Surveillance photos of her apartment building, her routes to work, even photos of her with Adrian in Siena. Someone had been watching them for weeks. These are Sal Romano's people, Marco explained. He was Vincent's underboss, did 10 years, got out last month. He's been consolidating what's left of the old crew, and he sees Adrian as a traitor who needs to be dealt with. Isabella's blood ran cold. Why are you telling me this? Because Adrien's about to go to war, and he's trying to keep you out of it. But you should know what you're in the middle of. Marco leaned against the bar. He's different with you, softer. And that makes you a target. Then we go to the police. The FBI. Marco's smile was bitter. Adrien's been working with federal prosecutors all day. But legal channels take time, and Romano won't wait. So what is Adrian doing? What he swore he'd never do again. Playing the game his father taught him. Adrian returned that night. Isabella was alone in the restaurant going over. The opening details were almost finalized when she heard the door. Adrian looked utterly drained. His suit was a mess. There were dark circles under his eyes, and that dangerous glint was back in full force. You should have told me, Isabella stated softly. Told you what? That getting close to me puts a target on your back. He walked behind the bar and poured himself a drink. I knew it. I knew from the moment I defended you that night that this could happen. And I did it anyway because I'm selfish. You're not selfish. I'm my father's son. Adrienne's voice was hard. Do you want to know what I've been doing for 3 days straight? I've been systematically dismantling Romano's entire operation. Not with bullets or bombs. I promised myself I would never go back to that. But with money, lawyers, and by putting pressure on the right people. I've frozen his accounts, had his properties seized for tax evasion, and turned 3 of his key lieutenants into federal witnesses. He downed the rest of his drink. I've been using every dirty trick my father ever taught me. The only difference is I'm doing it legally. Barely. Isabella walked over to him and took the glass from his hand. Did it work? For now, Romano's operation is completely crippled. He can't move money. Can't operate. His crew is scattering to the wind. Adrian gave a hollow laugh. Congratulations. You're in business with Chicago's most dangerous legitimate businessman. Stop. Isabella grabbed his face, forcing him to look directly at her. Stop punishing yourself for surviving. Stop apologizing for being good at something your father taught you. You use those skills to protect people, to protect me. That doesn't make you him. You don't know what I'm capable of. Then show me. She didn't let go. Show me the worst of you, Adrian. Show me the darkness you're so afraid of because I've seen the best, and I'm not going anywhere. Something in Adrienne's expression cracked. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. She kissed him hard, fiercely, claiming him. We open in 2 days, and Romano or not, Chicago or not, we're doing this together. Together? Adrian repeated, as if he was just testing the word out. Partners, remember? For the first time in 3 days, Adrian smiled. Partners. Outside, the city of Chicago glittered with 1,000 lights. And somewhere in those shadows, Sal Romano watched and waited. But inside Casa Verona, 2 people held each other tightly and pretended, just for a moment, that the world was only as big as the space between them. Opening night arrived, and it felt like a storm was about to break. Casa Verona gleamed. Every single table was booked solid. Food critics, social media influencers, old Chicago money, and people who just wanted to see what the son of Vincent Moretti had created all came out that night. The kitchen was a hive of controlled chaos. The staff moved like dancers, each person perfectly choreographed in their own position. Isabella stood at the hostess stand in a stunning black dress that Adrian had insisted on buying her in Siena. She watched the dining room fill, looking both beautiful and terrified at the same time. Breathe, Adrian murmured, appearing beside her in a perfectly tailored navy suit. We've got this. Do we? She kept her voice low. Marco told me Romano's been quiet. Too quiet. I know. Adrian's hand found hers behind the podium, where no one could see. But we don't let fear win. Not tonight. The first hour went off without a single hitch. The Casio ape, Adrian's grandmother's recipe, drew actual gasps from the crowd. The wine pairings Isabella had so carefully curated in Siena were just perfect. A food critic from the Tribune whispered to her assistant that this might be the best Italian meal she'd had outside of Italy. Then, right at 8:30, the door opened, and Sal Romano walked in. Isabella recognized him instantly from the photos Marco had shown her. He was about 60 years old, with gray hair slicked back and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and pure violence. He wasn't alone, for men flanked him, all wearing suits that couldn't quite hide their bulky frames. The restaurant's whole energy shifted. Conversations just died. Even the noise from the kitchen seemed to fade away. Adrian stepped forward, placing himself directly between Romano and Isabella. We're fully booked tonight. I'm sure you can find room for an old friend. Romano's voice was like sandpaper and smoke. We have so much to discuss about your father, about loyalty, about Chicago. There's nothing to discuss. No? Romano smiled, showing too many teeth. Not even about the federal investigation into my businesses? The one that coincidentally started 3 days ago with sealed evidence that only someone with intimate knowledge of old Moretti operations could have provided? Adrienne's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about. Liar. Romano took a step closer. His men tensed. You're just like Vincent. always thinking you're smarter than everyone else. But at least your father had the balls to do his own dirty work. My father, Adrian said quietly, dangerously, died in a cage. If you want to follow him there, keep talking. The threat just hung in the air. Isabella's heart hammered in her chest. She could see Marco and 2 other security personnel moving closer through the crowd, trying their best to look casual. Romano laughed. You think you can threaten me, boy? I was breaking bones for your father when you were still in diapers. You might wear fancy suits and buy restaurants, but you're still Moretti, still a criminal pretending to be legitimate. The only difference between us, Adrian said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent restaurant, is that I learned legitimacy is a far better weapon than violence. You burn my properties, I freeze your accounts. You threaten my people, I turn yours into federal witnesses. You want a war? I'll bury you in paperwork and prosecutions so deep you'll wish you were rotting in the same cell as my father. Tough words. Romano's hand moved toward his jacket. Everything happened at once. Marco was instantly there, gripping Romano's wrist tightly. The other security personnel surrounded Romano's men. Adrian didn't move. He didn't even flinch. You're not going to shoot me? Adrian said calmly. Not here. Not in front of 50 witnesses. Not with federal agents probably right outside right now because you're stupid enough to violate your parole by coming within 100 feet of me. Romano's face went purple. You set me up. I gave you enough rope. You hanged yourself. Adrian pulled out his phone, showing Romano the screen. It was a live feed. Federal agents were right outside watching the restaurant. The moment you walked through that door, you violated the restraining order my lawyers filed yesterday. You're going straight back to your prison cell. Not because I'm violent like my father, but because I'm smarter. For the first time that night, Romano looked uncertain, then truly afraid. Take him, Adrian said. Marco and his team escorted Romano and his men out of the restaurant. Through the windows, Isabella watched federal agents move in quickly, making the arrests. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. The restaurant remained frozen in complete silence. Then Adrian turned to the dining room. His composure was perfect and said, I sincerely apologize for that brief interruption. Tonight's desserts are on the house. Please enjoy the rest of your meals. Like a spell had been broken, conversations resumed. The kitchen staff started moving again. Someone laughed nervously. A food critic took another bite of pasta and started jotting down more notes. But Isabella saw what others didn't. The tremor in Adrien's hands as he straightened his cuffs. The way his jaw clenched tight. The storm brewing behind his carefully controlled expression. She followed him to his office in the back. The moment the door shut closed, Adrian slumped back against it. I planned that, he said hoarsely. All of it. I knew Romano would come. I knew he couldn't resist confronting me, and I used it. Used his pride, his anger, to put him back in prison. You protected everyone here. I simply manipulated him. Adrian looked at her with haunted eyes. Just like my father would have. The only real difference is that I use lawyers instead of guns. But the calculation, the coldness, that was all Vincent Moretti. Isabella walked over to him, taking his face gently in her hands. No. Your father would have had Romano killed, plain and simple. You had him arrested. Your father ruled through fear and intimidation. You just showed an entire restaurant, an entire city, that you can actually defend yourself without violence. That's not Vincent. That's you, Adrian. You sound so certain. I am certain. She kissed him softly, because Vincent Moretti would never have opened a restaurant, would never have learned to cook, would never have stood up for a waitress being abused by her boss. You're not your father, Adrian. You're the man who chose an entirely different path. Adrian pulled her close, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. What if I make the wrong choice? What if one day I wake up and I am him? Then I'll be right there to remind you who you really are. Isabella pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. That's what partners do. A knock sounded on the door. Marco stuck his head in. Romano's in custody. The federal agents want a statement, but they said it can wait until tomorrow. Oh, and boss? The dining room is giving you a standing ovation. Adrian blinked in surprise. What? They went back out to the dining room. The guests were standing and clapping enthusiastically. Not for the drama they just witnessed, but for the food, the ambience, and the sheer courage it took to face down the past and still keep serving excellent pasta. Adrian took Isabella's hand and squeezed it tight. "Together," he whispered. "Together," she confirmed. And for the first time since he'd returned to Chicago, Adrian Moretti smiled like he genuinely believed he might actually deserve some peace. 3 weeks after Romano's arrest, Adrian drove Isabella out to the countryside. Casa Verona had become the hottest reservation in all of Chicago. Critics called it transformative, a true love letter to authentic Italian cuisine, and undeniable proof that redemption really is possible. Isabella had been interviewed by multiple food magazines. Adrian had been profiled in several business journals. They were successful beyond their wildest dreams. But with that success came intense scrutiny. Cameras seemed to follow them everywhere. Gossip websites speculated endlessly about their relationship. Every decision was analyzed, and every single move was questioned. Chicago was watching closely, just waiting to see if the reformed Moretti would somehow stumble. "Where are we going?" Isabella asked as the city finally gave way to farmland. "Somewhere no one's watching," Adrian said. The villa appeared after an hour of driving. It was a stone farmhouse that sat on 20 acres, surrounded by overgrown gardens and wild grass. It was beautiful in a forgotten kind of way, like something straight out of a dream. "My grandmother's house," Adrian said, helping Isabella out of the car. "After she died, my father kept it, but he never actually came here. Too many difficult memories of her, I think. After he went to prison, it just sat empty." They walked through rooms thick with dust and complete silence. The kitchen still had her pots hanging neatly on hooks. The garden still had her rosemary growing completely wild. The bedroom still had her portrait hanging on the wall. A young woman with dark hair and eyes that looked just like Adrienne's. "She would have absolutely loved you," Adrian said, standing in the doorway. "She always said that I needed someone who wouldn't be afraid to tell me when I was being a complete idiot." "Smart woman." Isabella touched the portrait gently. "Why didn't you ever sell this place?" "Because it's the only piece of my family history that doesn't carry any violence. This house was always filled with joy, safety, and love." He moved over to the window, looking out at the overgrown fields. "I used to come here as a kid and pretend I lived in a completely different family. One where dinner wasn't interrupted by tense business calls, and where my father smiled naturally instead of coldly calculated." Isabella came to stand beside him. "You could actually restore it. Make it what you remember." "I've been thinking about that." Adrian turned to face her. "Actually, I've been thinking about a lot of things these last few weeks." Something in his tone made Isabella's heart skip a beat. "What things?" "About how every single night for the past 6 months, I've meticulously planned my own exit strategy. Where I'd go if Chicago suddenly turned on me. What I'd do if the past finally caught up. How I'd leave without causing too much collateral damage." His hand found hers. "Then you walked into my life, and you started building something that I actually wanted to stay for. Adrian, I'm in love with you." He said the words, and they came out rough, unpracticed, like he'd never spoken them before. "I know it's happening fast. I know it's complicated, and I know you only signed on to rebuild a restaurant, not to deal with federal investigations and mob threats and a business partner with enough baggage to fill a cargo plane. But I just can't keep pretending that this is strictly professional. Can't keep pretending that I don't think about you every single second of every day." Isabella's throat tightened. "You think I don't already know that? You think I haven't noticed how you always make absolutely sure that I eat dinner? How you always stand between me and the door whenever someone enters a room? How you look at me like I'm something precious instead of just another business partner? Then why haven't we talked about it? Because actually talking about it makes it real. And real means that it can potentially break." Isabella turned away, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. "Everything in my life before you was incredibly safe and small. Terrible tips, angry managers, but always utterly predictable. Then you came along, and suddenly I'm flying all the way to Italy and opening restaurants and falling in love with someone who has entire federal task forces investigating his complicated past. You're actually in love with me? Adrienne's voice was incredibly soft with wonder. Isabella laughed, a sound that was tinged with wetness. Of course I am, you absolute idiot. I've probably been in love with you since Siena. Maybe even before that. Since that very first night when you bandaged my hand and looked at me like I actually mattered. Adrienne closed the distance between them in 3 long strides, turning her to face him fully. You do matter, Isabella. You're the only thing that truly matters. That's not true at all. The restaurant matters a lot. Your redemption absolutely matters. Your grandmother's cherished memory matters. All of that matters deeply, because you make me want to be worthy of it. His hands cupped her face. Before you, I was just going through the motions, building businesses simply because it was better than the terrible alternative. But you make me want to actually live, Isabella. Want to create things that will actually last. Want to be someone who deserves a real future. You already are that person, Adrienne. Then stay with me, please. It wasn't quite a question, but it wasn't quite a definitive statement either. Not just at the restaurant. Not just as strictly business partners. Stay with me right here in all of the messy, complicated, beautiful ways that 2 people can possibly be together. Isabella kissed him long and deep and incredibly full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, she was smiling through her tears. I need you to promise me something, she said. Anything, Isabella. Promise me that when things inevitably get hard, and they will, you won't run. You won't suddenly decide that I'm better off without you and then disappear into some kind of noble sacrifice. You stay right here and we'll fight through it together as partners. Adrienne's thumb wiped away her tears. I spent my whole entire life running from my father, from Chicago, from anything and everything that might potentially hurt me. But with you, I actually want to plant my roots so incredibly deep that nothing could ever pull me away. They stood in his grandmother's house, holding each other tightly, while the warm afternoon light painted everything a soft golden color. Outside, the overgrown garden waited patiently to be tended. The neglected fields waited to be planted. And the house waited to be filled with life and laughter again. We could open a second location, Isabella said suddenly. Right here, something smaller, more intimate. A peaceful place where people could come to escape the noise and chaos of the city. Adrienne pulled back just a bit to look at her. You'd really want that? I want to build a real life with you, Adrienne. Not just another business, but a true, authentic life. And this place? She gestured to the entire house, the surrounding land, and the endless possibilities of it all. This could be our new beginning, our undeniable proof that good and beautiful things can always grow from broken ground. Moretti's table, Adrienne said softly. What? That's what we'll call it. A welcoming table where everyone is always welcome. A place where the family name Moretti signifies community and genuine connection instead of crime and violence. He actually smiled. That real smile that always made him look much younger and lighter. Where I can proudly cook my grandmother's treasured recipes, and you can create your own magic, and we can actually prove that genuine second chances really do exist. Together. Always together. They kissed again, sealing a true promise that had absolutely nothing to do with business and everything to do with hope. The press event was Isabella's inspired idea. Casa Verona's been open for a solid 2 months, she'd persuasively argued. We really need to capitalize on this amazing momentum. Show Chicago that we're definitely not just a flash in the pan. So they meticulously planned an evening showcase, inviting local food writers, prominent lifestyle bloggers, and a talented photographer from Bon Appetit. It was a real celebration of their incredible success and a strategic announcement about Moretti's table, the exciting countryside location that they'd been quietly developing. The restaurant gleamed that evening. The staff gracefully circulated, offering champagne and delicious small plates. Adrienne gave an incredibly moving speech about genuine second chances and the powerful importance of community that had several journalists in the crowd actually tearing up. Isabella stood proudly beside him, feeling equally proud and absolutely terrified in equal measure. Then she saw Richie. He was standing at the very back of the crowd, half hidden behind a reporter. He was much thinner than she remembered him being. His face was visibly haggard, and his clothes were quite wrinkled, but his eyes burned with something dark and incredibly desperate. Isabella's breath suddenly caught in her throat. She touched Adrienne's arm, subtly nodding toward the back of the room. Adrienne's expression immediately hardened. He discreetly signaled Marco with a quick gesture but continued his planned speech without actually missing a single beat. Marco began moving smoothly through the crowd, trying to appear as casual as possible but remaining incredibly purposeful. Richie quickly saw that they'd noticed him, and he ran. Not toward the nearest exit, but directly toward the bustling kitchen. "Everybody stay calm, please," Adrian said smoothly into the microphone, his voice remaining steady even as Isabella saw the obvious tension in his strong shoulders. "We're just going to take a very brief intermission. Please continue to enjoy the delicious appetizers. We'll be right back." He handed the microphone to a somewhat confused staffer and then moved quickly toward the kitchen. Isabella followed right behind him. "Adrian, wait," she started. "Stay here, please." "Absolutely not." She grabbed his hand tightly. "Partners, remember?" They pushed through the kitchen doors together. The staff had already scattered, sensing the immediate danger. The pots bubbled away unattended. And there, near the back door, stood Marco Ricci, holding a gun. Isabella's blood instantly turned to ice. "You ruined my life, Isabella," Ricci said. His voice actually shook, and the gun shook right along with it. Everything about him just screamed unstable. "I can't get work anywhere. My wife left me for someone else. My kids won't even return my calls anymore. All because you had to play the hero and get me fired." "Put the gun down, Marco," Adrian said, his voice calm, too calm. It was the voice of someone who had faced the barrel of a gun many times before. "This definitely isn't the answer. You don't actually get to tell me what the answer is." Richie's face was red, and tears were streaming down his cheeks. "You rich bastards. You actually think you can just destroy people's lives and simply walk away without any consequences. You somehow think that money fixes everything. But you took absolutely everything from me." "You took it from yourself, Richie," Isabella said, before she could actually stop herself. "The moment you decided to put your hands on me. The very moment you chose violence over basic human decency." "Shut up." Richie swung the gun directly toward her. Adrian moved incredibly fast, instinctively putting himself directly between Isabella and the gun's cold barrel. "You want to blame someone? Then blame me. I'm the one who decided to buy the restaurant. I'm the one who ultimately had you fired. Isabella was just doing the job that she was hired to do. She completely turned you against me. I saw exactly how you looked at her that night, like she was actually worth something, and I was nothing but trash." "You were abusing your staff, Richie," Adrian said. "That made you trash all on your own." Marco then appeared in the doorway behind Richie, moving as silently as a ghost. He quickly caught Adrienne's eye, silently signaling that he was completely ready to move, just patiently waiting for the right decisive moment. But Adrian subtly shook his head. "Not yet." "Why are you actually here, Richie?" Adrian asked. "Really? Do you just want money? I'll write you a check right now, I promise." "You want a sincere apology? Fine. I'm truly sorry that your life fell apart. I'm sorry that you're currently hurting so deeply, but pointing a loaded gun at us definitely won't fix a single thing. I don't want your dirty money." Richie's hand trembled violently. "I want you to finally feel what I felt. Helpless, utterly humiliated, and completely destroyed. Then pull the trigger right now," Adrian said quietly. "Adrian, no." Isabella grabbed his arm tightly, but he didn't actually move an inch. "I genuinely mean it, Richie. If killing me will somehow make you feel even just a little bit better, then do it. But then what is that really going to accomplish? You'll just go to prison forever. Your kids will actually lose their father permanently. Your wife will inevitably move on with her own life, and I'll still be just as dead, which won't bring back a single thing that you've already lost." Richie was now crying openly and uncontrollably. I just actually wanted them to see you. All those reporters that are out there. I wanted them all to see what you really are. A criminal, a goddamn Moretti. You try to act like you're actually better than your terrible father. But you destroyed my entire life just as completely as he destroyed the lives of everyone he ever touched. The incredibly painful words actually hit Adrian like a physical blow. Isabella felt him visibly tense beside her. You're absolutely right, Adrian said, and Isabella's head instantly snapped toward him in complete shock. Not about absolutely everything, but you are right about some of it. I did in fact destroy your entire life. Maybe I definitely could have handled the entire situation differently. Maybe I should have actually given you a well-deserved second chance instead of just abruptly throwing you out like trash. Maybe I was just so intensely focused on definitively proving that I wasn't anything like my violent father that I ended up acting exactly like him. Decisive, final, with absolutely no room for the remote possibility of redemption. He took a single step forward. The gun visibly rose higher. But here's the real difference between me and Vincent Moretti, Adrian continued. My father would have actually had you murdered for daring to touch his precious property. I just fired you from a job. My father absolutely would have made sure that you never actually worked again anywhere in any capacity. I simply didn't rehire you, that's all. And right now, my awful father would have already let Marco calmly put a bullet in the back of your head the second you even dared to walk in here. Adrian gestured slightly to Marco, who still stood completely frozen in the doorway. But I'm genuinely not going to do that, Richie, because you're not actually evil. You're just broken and angry and desperate. And believe it or not, I do know exactly what that actually feels like. I truly know what it's actually like to be the disappointing son of a notorious monster and constantly wonder if you're secretly a monster too. I truly know what it's like to inevitably hurt the people around you and then not have a clue how to fix a single damn thing. He then held out his open hand. Just give me the gun, Richie. Let me actually help you. Real, tangible help. Not just empty money or meaningless charity, but a true second chance. Because if I actually believe in real redemption for myself, then I definitely have to believe in it for you too, right? The entire kitchen was completely silent except for the sound of the few remaining pots still slowly bubbling away on the stoves. Isabella quietly held her breath. Richie looked at Adrienne's calmly outstretched hand, at the loaded gun, and at his own sad reflection in the stainless steel counter. Desperate, utterly pathetic, and completely lost. I definitely don't deserve it, he whispered. Neither do I, Adrian said. But we both still get to try anyway. That's exactly what a true second chance actually means. Slowly, so incredibly slowly, Richie actually lowered the heavy gun. Adrian then stepped forward and gently took it from him, carefully ejecting the magazine with practiced efficiency. He handed the gun to Marco without looking away from Richie. You mistakenly think that real power is just raw fear, Adrian said softly. But I finally learned something that my awful father never actually understood. Real power is genuine forgiveness. It's the ability and strength to actually show real mercy when you could just as easily show violence. Richie then completely collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. Adrian caught him and gently held him up, just like a loving father would selflessly hold his own son. I've got you, Richie, Adrian murmured softly. You're going to be okay, I promise. We're going to get you the actual help that you truly need. Real help. Isabella simply watched, with tears streaming uncontrollably down her face, as Adrian Moretti, the troubled son of Chicago's most notoriously violent crime boss, definitively chose genuine compassion over easy revenge. And in that incredibly moment, she simply knew without any question whatsoever that she would selflessly love this incredibly complex man for the rest of her entire life. 6 long months later, Casa Verona officially reopened under its new and inspired name, Taste of Fire. The entire rebrand had actually been Isabella's brilliant idea. We've both been through fire, both literal and deeply metaphorical. She'd explained. Let's fully own it. Let's boldly show all of Chicago that fire doesn't just violently destroy, it ultimately transforms. The carefully chosen name really resonated with the entire city. And the food critics absolutely loved the deeply symbolic meaning. The redesigned menu reflected it as well. Wood-fired pizzas, flame-roasted vegetables, and uniquely inspired dishes that deliberately embraced the intense heat and meaningful transformation. Adrian had also added many of his beloved grandmother's carefully guarded recipes to the menu, each one a small but meaningful rebellion against his father's terrible and destructive legacy. On the very night of the highly anticipated grand reopening, Isabella stood confidently near the entrance in a stunning deep red dress, warmly greeting the arriving guests with genuine enthusiasm. A confidence blossomed within her, a strength she couldn't have fathomed possessing even 6 months prior. She was no longer simply a waitress. She was co-owner, operations director, the very heartbeat of Taste of Fire. A nervous Adrian materialized beside her, looking absolutely stunning in a tailored black suit. Terrified, she confessed. What if people don't like it? They will, he reassured, squeezing her hand quickly and discreetly. Because we built something truly real, something that truly matters. He was absolutely right. The restaurant was brimming, every single table occupied by patrons who had been eagerly anticipating this moment for months. The exquisite wine Isabella had meticulously sourced from Siena flowed freely. The kitchen staff moved with the precision and harmony of a symphony orchestra. Even old Tony, a man who rarely cracked a smile, was beaming as he meticulously plated each dish. The esteemed food critic from the Chicago Tribune approached them as the appetizer course was being served. "This is truly remarkable," she declared, gesturing towards her plate of burrata with fire-roasted tomatoes. "However, I must inquire, how do you respond to those who suggest this is merely a clever PR stunt? That you're exploiting a restaurant to rehabilitate the tarnished Moretti name?" Adrian began to speak, but Isabella interjected smoothly. "I would venture to say they are partially correct," she stated, noticing Adrienne's surprised expression. "This venture absolutely rehabilitates the Moretti name, but not through superficial public relations, but through concrete action. Every employee here receives comprehensive health care, fair wages, and a share of the profits. Every ingredient is ethically sourced from suppliers whom we pay promptly. Every decision we make is guided by the fundamental question: does this create genuine value, or does it merely extract it?" She turned to Adrian, her gaze filled with affection and respect. Adrian could have opened a restaurant anywhere in the world. He could have easily concealed his involvement behind a complex corporate structure, keeping his name far from the public eye. Instead, he boldly placed his family name on something that builds up the community, rather than tearing it down. That is not PR. That's purpose. The critic meticulously scribbled notes, nodding thoughtfully. "And what about you? How do you respond to the rampant speculation regarding your relationship with Mr. Moretti? Some suggest it's a conflict of interest mingling business with love." Isabella finished for her. "I would argue that love is precisely what makes this endeavor so successful. We challenge each other constantly. We push each other to strive for excellence. And yes," she admitted with a playful smile, "we sometimes engage in heated debates about whether truffle oil has any place in modern cuisine." "It absolutely does not," Adrian interjected emphatically. "But those disagreements ultimately make us stronger," Isabella added, her smile widening. "Both the relationship and the business benefit from our passion and dedication. Besides," she continued, her eyes twinkling, "if we can successfully navigate federal investigations, mob threats, and even an armed confrontation in our very own kitchen, I think we are more than capable of managing a restaurant together." The critic chuckled, clearly impressed. "You might just be the most candid restaurant owner I've ever had the pleasure of interviewing." After the critic departed, Adrian gently guided Isabella aside, leading her into the quiet sanctuary of his office. "That was incredible," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "The way you handled her questions, the way you fearlessly defended us." Isabella finished his sentence. "I defended us, Adrian, because I'm frankly tired of apologizing for loving you, tired of treating our relationship as if it were something scandalous, rather than something beautiful and precious." "I know," he replied, his brow furrowed with concern. "I just worry about the intense scrutiny it brings upon you, the way people perceive you differently simply because you're with me." "Let them look," she retorted, her eyes blazing with fierce affection. She stepped closer to him, her voice softening. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Adrian?" "What?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I see the man who passionately cooks his grandmother's time-honored recipes at 2 in the morning when he can't find sleep. I see the man who steadfastly insisted we hire Marco Ricci's cousin when no one else would even give her a chance. I see the man who openly wept when we received our first perfect review, because it meant your mother would have been proud." Her hand tenderly found his cheek. "I see the man I love, Adrian. Everything else is simply background noise." Adrian kissed her deeply, slowly. His kiss filled with unwavering love and unspoken promises. When they finally broke apart, he reached into his pocket, his expression filled with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "I was going to wait," he confessed, producing a small velvet box. "Maybe do something elaborate, incredibly romantic. But Isabella," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "you make me want to stop meticulously planning and simply embrace life, live in the moment." He opened the box, revealing a ring, simple yet undeniably elegant, with a band crafted from melted silver. "My father's cufflinks," Adrian explained, his voice trembling slightly. "The only keepsake of his that I retained. I had them melted down and reimagined into something new, something that represents transformation and hope, rather than simply legacy." Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with emotion. "My past built this," Adrian continued, his voice choked with emotion. "Every arduous lesson, every mistake, every moment of darkness ultimately led me to you. But our love will rebuild me, will keep rebuilding me every single day. So, Isabella, will you marry me?" "Yes." She didn't allow him to finish his proposal. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit flawlessly, as if it had been destined for her all along. They kissed again, their lips meeting in a passionate embrace, and through the office window, they could see the vibrant dining room, filled with life and laughter, and people savoring food prepared with genuine love. They could see their dedicated staff working together seamlessly, a testament to their shared vision. They could see the twinkling city lights of Chicago shimmering beyond the windows. "We did it," Isabella whispered, her voice filled with awe and gratitude. "We actually built something that matters." "We're not done yet," Adrian replied, pulling her close. "Moretti's table opens in 3 weeks, and I'm thinking maybe after that we start planning something else." He hesitated for a moment, then continued, his voice filled with a quiet hope. "Another restaurant, a family," he said, testing the words, as if unsure of how they would sound aloud. "I never thought I'd want that. Never thought I'd be the kind of man who could be a father without completely screwing it up. But with you, Isabella, I want everything. Kids running through that farmhouse, teaching them to cook, showing them that the Moretti name can represent love and compassion instead of fear and intimidation." Isabella's eyes welled up with tears, her heart overflowing with happiness. "That sounds absolutely perfect," she whispered. "Not perfect," Adrian corrected gently, "but real, messy, complicated, and absolutely worth fighting for." Outside the office, someone called their names, drawing them back to reality. The dinner service was reaching its peak, demanding their attention. Critics were clamoring for their presence. The restaurant needed its owners. But for just one more precious moment, they lingered there, lost in each other's arms. Two souls who had found each other amidst the chaos and flames and had together forged something beautiful and enduring that would outlast even the fiercest fires. "Ready?" Adrian asked, extending his hand. Isabella took it without hesitation, her engagement ring catching the light and sparkling brilliantly. "Always," she replied, her voice filled with unwavering love and determination. They walked hand in hand back into the dining room together, stepping into the vibrant noise, the intense heat, and the beautiful chaos of their creation. And Chicago, always watching, always judging, always analyzing, finally saw what they had known all along. This wasn't merely about a restaurant. It was a story of redemption, about proving that your past does not have to define your future. It was about love being the only fire truly worth keeping alive. 1 year later, the rolling Tuscan hills were bathed in golden sunlight. Moretti's table stood proudly at the crest of a gentle slope, surrounded by lush vineyards that Adrian and Isabella had lovingly planted themselves. The old farmhouse had been carefully transformed, not into some sterile modern showpiece, but into a welcoming space filled with warmth and life. His grandmother's beloved kitchen had been meticulously restored, thoughtfully expanded, and transformed into the very heart of a restaurant that felt more like coming home than simply going out to eat. Children played joyfully in the courtyard, their laughter echoing off ancient stone walls that had been silent for far too long. Local families mingled effortlessly with visitors from Chicago, from Italy, from all corners of the globe. There were no velvet ropes here, no pretentious dress codes, just long, inviting wooden tables, delicious food, and the kind of genuine welcome that instantly made strangers feel like cherished family. Isabella stood serenely in the doorway, one hand resting protectively on her growing belly, watching Adrian as he expertly manned the outdoor grill. He had insisted on cooking outside for the grand opening, explaining that his grandmother had always believed the most delicious food was created under the open sky. "You're supposed to be resting," Maria called from inside, where she was diligently managing the front of house. She had relocated from Chicago to help run Moretti's table, bringing her husband and her beloved grandchildren along with her. "I'm standing. That counts as resting," Isabella replied with a warm smile. "Besides, I wouldn't miss this for the world." The opening had been deliberately understated, intimate. No press coverage, no demanding critics, no grandiose announcements. Just a simple, heartfelt invitation to the local community. "Come eat with us." The response had been nothing short of overwhelming. Every table was filled to capacity. People sat contentedly on the grassy lawn, balancing plates laden with food on their laps. Wine flowed freely. Music filled the air. Carlos emerged from the kitchen, carrying another steaming tray of pasta. "Boss, we're running low on the cacio e pepe," he announced. "Should I prepare another batch?" "Make 3, Isabella instructed. "And Carlos, please stop calling me boss. We've discussed this." "Sorry, Isabella," he said, grinning sheepishly. "Old habits die hard." Adrian appeared beside her, smelling delightfully of wood smoke and fragrant herbs. His sleeves were casually rolled up, and his face was flushed from the warmth of the grill. He had never looked more handsome. "Come with me," he said softly, gently taking her hand. "There's something I want to show you." He led her away from the bustling restaurant, up a small, winding path that meandered through the sprawling vineyard. The setting sun painted the landscape in hues of amber and gold, creating a breathtaking vista. In the distance, the rolling hills stretched out as far as the eye could see. They stopped at the highest point of the vineyard, where a solitary olive tree stood, ancient and gnarled, yet still bearing fruit after a century of existence. "My grandmother planted this tree," Adrian said, his hand resting lovingly on the rough bark. "The year she married my grandfather. She told me once that olive trees live for centuries, that they can endure drought, fire, frost, and that they only grow stronger with age." He turned to face Isabella, his eyes filled with love and admiration. "I used to think that was just a nice story, but now I truly understand. She was telling me that the good things, the real things in life, they endure. They survive even the harshest seasons. They grow deeper roots." Isabella gently took his hand, placing it on her belly, where their unborn daughter kicked playfully. "She would have absolutely loved this," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "All of it. I think she'd love you most of all." Adrienne's eyes shone brightly with unshed tears. "You gave me something I thought the Moretti family had lost forever, hope. A future that isn't perpetually haunted by the ghosts of the past." "We gave each other that," Isabella corrected gently. They stood there together, hand in hand, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in breathtaking shades of fire. Below them, the sounds of laughter and celebration drifted up from Moretti's table. Music played softly in the background. People ate, drank, and celebrated the simple yet profound joy of being together, of sharing a meal, of building community. "I was thinking," Adrian said quietly, his voice tinged with emotion, "about something Marco Ricci said, back when he broke into Casa Verona." Isabella tensed slightly, a shadow passing over her face. Marco Ricci was doing significantly better now, diligently attending therapy and working at a community center that Adrian had generously funded. He was slowly but surely rebuilding his shattered life, but the memories of that night still carried a heavy weight. "He said I was just like my father because I had destroyed his life," Adrian continued, his voice filled with a quiet sadness. "And at the time I vehemently believed he was wrong. I was certain I was nothing like Vincent. But he was right about one thing. I did destroy something. I destroyed the version of myself that was perpetually afraid to build anything permanent, afraid to love deeply, afraid to plant roots because I was convinced I didn't deserve them." He looked at Isabella, his eyes filled with unwavering love and gratitude. "You helped me to destroy that fear, Isabella, and in its place we built this." He gestured expansively to encompass the restaurant, the lush vineyard, the vibrant life spreading out before them. "A kingdom that has absolutely nothing to do with power or fear or violence. A kingdom built on honest work, good food, and love. And family," Isabella added softly, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "And family," Adrian agreed, his hand covering hers. A figure appeared on the path below them. It was Marco, their loyal friend and head of security, although there was rarely anything to secure out here in the peaceful countryside. "Hate to interrupt," Marco called out, his voice filled with amusement, "but Chicago's on the phone. The mayor wants to give you both some kind of award for community development. Something about revitalizing the restaurant industry." Adrian looked at Isabella, his eyebrows raised in a silent question. "What do you think?" "I think we'll take the call tomorrow," she replied with a radiant smile. "Tonight, we're exactly where we need to be." Marco nodded in understanding and disappeared back down the path. Adrian gently pulled Isabella close, careful to avoid putting any pressure on her belly, and kissed her forehead tenderly. "All my life, I fought for power," he whispered, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "Fought against my father's twisted version of it. Fought relentlessly to build my own empire. But it turns out that peace was the only crown worth wearing." Isabella turned in his arms to watch the breathtaking sunset. Below them, their beloved restaurant glowed with warmth and life. Their dedicated staff, their chosen family, worked together in perfect harmony. Their unborn daughter kicked playfully, impatient to join this beautiful world they had created. "And love," she said softly, her voice filled with contentment, "is the only fire worth keeping." As the sun slowly set over the rolling Tuscan hills, Adrian Moretti and Isabella Cani stood together, watching their kingdom of kindness continue to grow and flourish. The Moretti name would live on, not in fear or violence, but in every meal served with love and compassion, every family warmly welcomed, every life transformed by the simple yet profound belief that people deserve second chances. The fire had burned away everything false and superficial. What remained was real, enduring, and utterly beautiful.